this is a story some of you might have heard this before.
Anybody who's been to the Golden Horseshoe Review in the 70s, you probably heard this. Yes.
Anybody who had a chance in elementary school to learn about American legends might have heard this, but you might not have heard how the thing started at the very beginning. Now they say long, long ago there was a family.
Living out in the Midwest, on the prairies of the Midwest.
Well, kind of Midwesty towards Texas-y, down in the middle of the country. It was a large family. They had, well, 12 or so kids.
Yeah, a lot of kids.
Not, who knew how many, but the youngest one's name was Bill. They had run out of all of the really fancy good names, but Bill was good. But one day, the father realized he could see over the hill 50 miles away, looks like some other homesteaders have settled in over there. It's getting way too crowded here. Let's pack up the wagon and head west.
So that's what they did. They packed up their wagon. They got all 12-some kids in there. They got all of their clothes and their belongings and everything. They loaded up on the wagon and headed west.
So they were going along, and they were all in their Conestoga wagon and all going. And
hardly a trail to follow.
It was noisy. You got all of those kids in there
screaming and yelling all day long. Oh, I'm not touching you. Yeah, see, I'm going to tell Mom.
I'm going to tell you, I know. And they hit a bump.
A big rock in the road.
A big one, and whoop!
Bill flew right out of that wagon and landed plop right on the ground.
Now, there were so many kids there.
Screaming and yelling.
Nobody even noticed Bill was gone.
For like 2 weeks. Yeah. And Mom was so sad she was crying, my Bill, I gotta go back and get my Bill.
But at the point when they realized that, it was kind of too late.
Yeah, Pa was like, he's a strong boy. He's smart. He'll be fine out there on his own.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, it turned out Bill was strong and he was smart, but he was kind of sitting around crying.
Oh, the tears were wailing, you screaming and yelling.
And who should come along but Granddad Coyote?
Oh, yeah, Granddad Coyote. He heard all that wailing and a crying, and he followed the sound, and he saw, oh my gosh, the weirdest critter he'd ever seen.
Well, some kind of, hairless little varmint, but he was kind of cute.
And in big trouble.
So he went over and grabbed him by the scruff of his neck.
Believe it or not, picked him up by his neck and walked him back to where all the rest of the coyotes were waiting.
Now those other coyotes looked and they sniffed.
That is not a coyote. What is he doing here?
But, Granddad said, here's your new brother, boys.
Yes.
So, and a few minutes later, Granddad went and brought him a nice hunk of raw deer meat.
Now, Bill had never eaten raw meat before, but he was starving, and he dug his face in, and he just kept eating. Ooh, it was the best meal he'd had in weeks.
And Granddad did like a boy with a good appetite.
Yes.
And so, Bill kind of settled on in, and, he kind of liked those coyotes, and they kind of liked him. And before he knew it, eventually he grew out of those little breeches that he had on.
Running around naked.
And, that was fine, because, he kind of figured he was a coyote, just like all the other ones.
And coyotes are adapters, so he learned to adapt. And not only did he learn from the coyotes, he learned from all the desert critters, the raccoons and the jackrabbits and the armadillos. He learned all the different ways of living in the wild.
But one day, when I figure he was probably about 18 years old,
yeah, they're about that
old, along came an honest-to-goodness cowboy.
That's right. And he was riding his way through the desert, and he came across the Rio Grande River, and he saw right there on the edge of the Rio Grande River a naked man.
Wait, not the Rio Grande, where the Rio Grande
Pecos,
and the Pecos River cross.
Yes.
That's where it was. But he stopped to water his horse, and he looked over, and who was down there but...
Naked man lapping up water like he was a wild animal.
And he said, boy, what you doing?
He couldn't hardly speak much. He hadn't talked human in a long time.
What are you doing down there acting like a wild animal?
Well, wild animal? I'm not no wild animal. I mean, I am. I'm a coyote. I am a coyote.
You ain't no coyote.
Oh, sure, I'm a coyote. I got fleas, don't I?
Well, you know, half the people in Texas got fleas. Look at, well, okay, here's the most important thing.
Yeah.
You got a tail?
Well, of course, coyote's got a tail. That's right. I don't see a tail anywhere.
And he went over by the river and said, take a look down there, boy. You're not a coyote. You're a man.
Well, Bill, he looked down in the reflection of the water. And he looked back up at the cowboy, and he looked at himself in the water, and he looked up at the cowboy, and he realized, I look a lot like the cowboy except without clothes.
And so the cowboy said, you know, young man, I'm going to give you some clothes and bring you back to me and teach you more about being a human.
That's right. So, the cowboy who decided to call Bill Pecos Bill on a county founded by the Pecos River heads him back to the ranch where he works. Now, they only have one horse.
He gave him some cowboy clothes.
Yeah.
Ooh, that's not good.
There we go. Cowboy
He
clothes.
gave him some cowboy clothes and it brought him in. But the other cowhands thought he was kind of weird and strange, and, well, he refused to do anything about that crazy hair.
Yeah, that's right. He could wear clothes, but not cutting that hair, no, that big long red hair. No.
He wouldn't do that. Well, but before he knew it, he learned a little bit about, well, being a cowboy.
Yeah. But he saw some of the cowboy things they were doing. Didn't seem to make a lot of sense. For example, back in these days, when they tried to catch a wild cow, they would just put a rope out on the ground, wait for the cow to step into it, and snag it down.
Didn't seem to Bill like a very good way to be able to do that.
And he also taught them coyote singing. Oh, yes.
They would get together at night and howl at the moon. Oh! And pretty soon, they were doing some cowboy songs by the firelight, maybe a little cowboy poetry. It was pretty good. But, you know, Pecos Bill, he was feeling like these guys were, well...
They're tough guys, but not as tough as the animals he grew up with.
He said, you know, these guys are kind of a little bit weenie.
And he knew that they were kind of a little bit weedy when one day they were sitting in the chow hall and a bunch of the ranch hands come running on in, all in a lather, screaming and yelling, oh my God,
They're coming!
Oh Lord, they're right over the hill. Oh my God, what's happening?
And Bill said, what in the world? And I said, they're on our property. They're on the property. The Hell's Gate gang.
Oh,
they are here. They're mean.
They bite nails for fun.
Oh. And Bill said,
well, these sound like the kind of rough guys I should be riding with. Where are these guys at?
Well, oh, you don't want to go over there. They're really mean. But about 100 miles west from here.
100 miles west. I'm going to go find me those boys. So he got himself a horse and saddled up, and he headed on out to find the Hell's Gate gang.
It was quite a horse. He was riding along. It was, you know, he was a pretty good rider by this point.
Yep.
But before he knew it, that horse
stepped in a rabbit hole.
And broke a leg.
Ow!
Oh, now some people would say, well, that poor horse, he had to put him down. But
No.
Bill said, well, that's okay.
Put his horse around his neck.
And he decided
There we go.
He decided to just carry him as he went along. Well, he got a little bit further when all of a sudden he heard a wild rattling sound.
And it was a big, huge rattlesnake.
Now, many people would have run, but not Bill.
No, he took his horse off, put it off his shoulder, put it down on the ground, and he got it ready for that snake.
Well, the snake was trying to bite him, and it was trying to go, it was trying to choke him but not Bill.
Ah, he grabbed that snake by the neck, and they tussled and they fought, and he grabbed on that. They tussled for 2 days, holding that snake.
And finally, Bill squeezed the poison right out of that snake, and the snake went limp.
Well, you're a pretty tough guy, Snake. You're a pretty tough guy, but not tougher than me. But you're so good, I think I'm going to take you along with me. So Pecos wrapped that snake around his arm, picked his horse back up, put it around his neck.
There we go. And they got a little bit farther down, 20 more miles, when who came out of the plains but a puma.
A mountain lion. Oh, and that mountain lion came creeping up on him, and he was just about ready to pounce.
But then Bill pounced back on him.
He grabbed that big old mountain lion, and he grabbed him by the neck, and they tussled and they fought for like a week long.
Before that finally the puma lay down and basically said, "You win." And so Bill,
you're a tough guy.
He took the saddle off the back of that horse,
put it right on the back of that mountain lion, hopped on board that mountain lion, and kept on a ride.
And picked up the horse around his neck, picked up the rattlesnake around his arm, and they got just about to the place where the Hell's Gate gang was.
Now, the Hell's Gate gang had some lookouts, and they had seen this guy coming across the desert, and word had gotten back to the Hell's Gang hideout when Bill rode in to their hideout. Oh my gosh, there he was, all the gang members standing around waiting for him, and there he rides up. A man with a cowl around his neck, a rattlesnake around his arm, a mountain lion under his mount. Oh.
They all looked, and then Bill asked the critical question.
Yeah, who's the leader of this gang around here anyway?
Well, they all looked at each other, and one said, "Well, I used to be, but I reckon you are now."
Ooh. So that's the way Bill became the head of the Hell's Gate gang. But the strange thing about Bill, because he's raised by wild animals and they know better, he didn't like thieving. He didn't like thieving at all, and that's how these boys made their living.
And so he helped them figure out, instead of like trapping those horses and cows with a little rope on the ground.
Well, he took that snake off around his arm, and he showed them how to twirl that rope and catch them cows just like that. Pull them on in.
And that's how Pecos Bill invented lariat lassoing.
And he taught them how to howl at the moon. That's how they learned how to do cowboy singing. Bill taught these boys how to do all kinds of stuff people think now. Naturally, that's what cowboys do. A lot of that he learned from Bill.
Yeah, all came back from Bill. But the happiest day in Bill's life was when he was down by the river and he saw, surprisingly jumping out of the water, the biggest catfish anyone had ever seen.
It was like the size of a whale. Now, you might think that's amazing, but what's even more amazing than that is on the back of that giant fish was riding a beautiful lady.
Yeah!
Oh my God! Bill was just one look at her and he was smitten. Oh, you're so beautiful. Who are you? Who are you?
Well, hi there, darling. My name is Slew-Foot Sue.
And then she
just
splashed down in the water and the fish went down the river. She was gone. Oh, I've got to find her. Oh, I've got to meet this woman.
So he searched and finally found her cabin on the top of a lonely mesa. And he came up and, well, why one thing led to another. And, well, he asked, couldn't they do some courting?
Yes, he made his intentions known. And she thought, he seems like a nice enough guy. He seems like a tough guy. And they went to court.
And eventually, Slew-Foot Sue thought, here's at last a man who really could be my match. So she agreed when he suggested maybe they should get married. She said, well, yes, I could, but there are 2 conditions.
2 conditions? My love has 2 conditions. How could I not give
Condition number 1, I want the prettiest wedding gown you've ever seen. I want it to be, well, big and fluffy and hoop skirts and a bustle.
Yes.
And one more thing.
Ah.
Well, you didn't know, that besides that old horse with the broken leg.
Yes, he needed a new horse after that, so he decided he wanted to get the roughest, toughest horse he could ever find. So he went riding out into the desert looking for a wild horse when he saw a very giant, strong, burly-looking horse.
And he rode that horse. He jumped on. Everyone said, nobody can tame that horse. And he rode it from one side of Texas to another. And at last, he tamed that horse only for him. And so he named that horse Lightning.
Yeah. So she wanted to ride Lightning after the wedding.
Said, you know what? I like everything about you, but I especially admire that horse. So once we get married, I want to ride Lightning.
I don't know. That sounds awful dangerous.
That's what I need to do.
I don't know, but you are my beloved. How could I say no to Slew-Foot Sue? So that's what Pecos Bill did. He sent out to New York City for the finest, most beautiful wedding dress ever, with the hugest hoop skirt you can imagine, and the springiest bustle anybody had ever seen in the West. Yes.
Need help there?
So, the day came that they were to get married. All their friends and kin gathered around. Well, Bill didn't have no kin left, but everybody they knew came and gathered around for the wedding. It was beautiful. There was lace, there were flowers, there was beautiful music. It was everything you could imagine.
It's so good.
Western.
Bill, I was so looking forward to this day. I do. Do you?
I do.
All right. It's so good. So then, let's get to riding that Lightning.
Oh, my goodness. Well, again, Dick didn't think this was the best idea ever, but she said she could ride any beast on land or sea, so he thought he'd let her give it a shot. So
Lightning came over, and even in her wedding gown,
bustle and hoops and all,
hopped right onto that horse.
Aha! Well, as soon as her back end hit the saddle, Lightning went crazy. He was a bucking and a twirling and a twisting, and he was bucking so hard, but he bucked poor Slew-Foot Sue right out of the saddle. He bucked so hard, he kicked her up over the moon. Yes.
She came down. Everyone went, phew, that's good. But that bustle, well, it just bounced right like a spring. And she went, boing.
So she bounced up on her bustle, boing, and she landed on the ground, boing, up again, falling down, boing, up. Well, Pecos Bill was in a panic and laughed. Oh, he had to get his girl back. He didn't know how to do it because she was bouncing up and down out of the sky. Then he saw something. Oh, he saw coming across the plain a twister. That's right, a big old tornado. And he goes, aha, that is my salvation, a tornado. So Bill pulled out his rattlesnake lariat and he roped that tornado. And he climbed aboard that tornado. He was riding it back and forth across the desert. Tried to chase down Slew-Foot Sue as she's bouncing up and down on the ground. And finally he got close enough as she fell down one more time and he grabbed her with his arms.
Well, that was a right good ride.
Now, some people say that Pecos Bill never did actually capture Slew-Foot Sue. She's still bouncing up and down across the desert even to this very day. That's not the way we heard it.
We heard it.
Yeah.
They were so happy.
They rode that tornado all the way to California.
And they settled in California and had a bunch of kids.
Found Bill's kith and kin living out there.
And some of them say they even found an abandoned litter of coyotes and, well, raised them up too, because the more the merrier. And so that is the story of the very beginnings and possibly the endings of Pecos Bill.